Yes, Vijayji, you can unmute yourself, but before that, we do have Shri Philip Goldberg join us. So if it is not extremely important or something that you would want to convey right away, if you could just wait for a few minutes.
Can I be heard?
Namaste, Dr.
Namaste, you hear me well?
We cannot hear you, Philip Ji. You're not audible.
Wonder what's going on. It's on the right setting. Do you not hear me?
Could you just say something? I don't think we
I
can.
am saying things.
Yes, now I was able to
Now
hear
it's
you.
okay? Okay, good.
Good to go. And welcome, Philip Ji, for the webinar to introduce your new course. We are all looking forward to it. Seems extremely interesting, and I will quickly and briefly introduce you to the audience. Some of them are our regular attendees, so they are definitely familiar with you. But for all the people who have joined us for the first time, Philip Goldberg, a faculty member at HUA for almost 3.5, 4 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, Philip Ji. And he has been studying world's spiritual traditions for more than 50 years now as a practitioner, teacher, and author. His books include American Veda, from Emerson and the Beatles to yoga and meditation. Also, how Indian spirituality changed the West and the life of Yoganand, the story of the yogi who became the first modern guru. And Philip Ji has a wonderful, wonderful course based on autobiography of the yogi. So, and he is an ordained interfaith minister, a spiritual counselor, and a meditation teacher as well. He is an illuminating and entertaining public speaker who has presented at universities, religious and spiritual institutions, yoga centers and festivals, and various other venues through the US and India. He also contributes regularly to Spirituality and Health, Cover, and other publications, hosts the popular Spirit Matters podcast on mindbodyspirit.fm, leads American Veda tours to India, and serves on the board of the Association for Spiritual Integrity. That's Philip Goldberg for you. In brief, I will not take much of your time. And as usual, welcome, Philip Ji. It's an honor, as always, to host you and listen to you, speak to you, speak about your course, how you kind of are going to unpack it and let us know what it is, of course, all about. Over to you, Philip Ji. And all the participants, just a request, if you have any questions, please put it in Q&A box. We will take the questions after he has finished his presentation.
I'll be brief. Thank you, Pragya. Hello, everybody. I have no way of seeing you, but I'm sure there are some familiar faces if I could. I've taught.
Philip Ji, sorry to interrupt. We only have 46 participants. If any one of you wants to be promoted to a panelist so that you can interact, or if Philip Ji would want to see you, we can do that as well.
Whatever works.
So anyone of you, if you want, you can let me know. I will do that. Thank you. Please go ahead.
So I've taught 3 different courses for HUA. One, as Pragya said, is about autobiography of a yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda's classic memoir, because I wrote a biography of Yogananda. So That's one of the courses. I do a course about how Hindu Dharma came to America through the arts, which is always a lot of fun. And also an overview of how Hindu teachings transformed America. In this course, I'm focusing on the gurus who came here, all the swamis, yoga masters, and independent gurus who came over the course of time, beginning with, of course, Swami Vivekananda in 1893, and moving on to Yogananda, and then all the many gurus who came in the 60s and 70s who had a big impact on America. And we'll talk about the contemporary gurus that are still having a big impact on American life, who all of whom, of course, came to us from India, from different lineages, different sampradayas, and brought out different teachings. I think one of the things that Americans don't fully understand is how diverse the Hindu tradition is. And a good way to get a sense of that is through the different teachings that different gurus emphasized when they came here that appeal to different groups of people. And we'll talk a bit about non-Indian people who became gurus in their own right, or at least, or became certified and authorized to represent different traditions, different paramparas. And so that's the focus, and I'll take it pretty much chronologically, focusing on the most influential of the teachers who came, focusing on who they were, what their backgrounds were, why they came here, when they came here, what they did when they came here, and their teachings. And now I've written about most of them in the past. And one of the things I'm looking forward to is in an online course, because of technology, you can do things you can't do in a book, like play videos of these gurus and see them in action, hear audios. In some cases, if they were like Srila Prabhupada, so focused on the bhakti tradition, we could play some kirtan. So there's things we can do that I can't do in the written form, and I'm really looking forward to that, to give you a greater sense of these people. The only one that we do not have actual recordings of course, is Vivekananda, who came much before that technology existed, and some of the swamis who came here after Vivekananda, but from his own the same lineage, the Ramakrishna lineage. There's no video of them either. But beginning with Yogananda late in his life, we have audios and videos, and of course, starting in the 1960s, we have recordings of most of the people who came here and had an impact. Now, one of the things I want to focus on in the course is not just to profile the different teachers and bring out what they accomplished and the inroads they made in bringing this wisdom to people's lives in the West, but the whole phenomenon of bringing the Guru tradition to a different culture. How Americans responded the institutions and the norms that were established for bringing, I mean, this was very different from people going to a church or synagogue, because one of the features of the Hindu Dharma is it had the versatility and the universality to appeal to a wide range of people, some of whom took on the role of shishya in the guru disciple tradition of that relationship. But of course, that wasn't for most Americans who saw the gurus as their mentors or teachers and didn't have that attitude of devotion to the guru. Some did and some didn't. And so different um, ways of reaching people, different dynamics of the student-teacher relationship had to be established here, similar to the way things are in India, but having a character of their own, especially those people who wanted to remain in their own religious tradition or were secular entirely and saw the teachings in a practical, pragmatic way as means of self-improvement and spiritual development, but did not want to adopt the form of guru devotion. And the gurus, for the most part, accommodated all these different personalities, and they had to be very skillful in how they adapted the teachings themselves to the English language, to the culture of America, which is, of course, very different from India, and to the time and place they were in and the kind of people who were drawn to them. So a lot of the teachings took on different language and different emphasis to accommodate the scientific, secular, practical orientation of people in the West. And it's fascinating to see how the different gurus adapted and presented the teachings without but finding the right balance between adapting a message and techniques and abstract teachings to a different language and a different culture without compromising the integrity of the teachings themselves. And some did this extremely well, some were not as good. And we have to also address what psychologists would call the shadow side of the gurus coming here. It's no secret that some of them misbehaved and there were scandals, and the effects of some of them are still being felt 40, 50 years later. They also, and this is another part of the story that's, of great interest historically and sociologically, especially the ones who came early in this history, they faced a lot of backlash, a lot of hostility. A lot of it was racial. There were, America's past of religious and racial bigotry and hostility was a part of this story. They all had to overcome a certain amount of resistance. At the same time, other Americans were embracing them and welcoming them and couldn't wait to, be part of their teachings and learn from them. But there were others, and there's, heartbreaking stories and some funny stories and interesting stories about how the teachers were, or gurus were not attacked physically, but threatened and had gossip and lawsuits and all kinds of things hurled at them that they had to deal with. And the stereotypes people had of Indians and Hindus that they had to overcome. So it's a very rich story and a very diverse story. And I want to approach it with all these phenomena in mind and discuss toward the end of the course what might happen moving forward as the teachings become more and more established in America. The nature of the guru and student relationship is changing. And we can look ahead to see what might be coming down the pike, as they say. So that's the overview, and I hope you can all join us. We can open it to questions, Pragya-ji, if you want.
Okay, so thank you so much, Philip, for this brief but really interesting introduction for your course. Looks definitely interesting. I will open the webinar now for questions. All of you can please start putting your questions in the Q&A box. If you want to discuss something, you want to ask him something directly, you can just raise your hands and I will allow you to ask the question. We do have one question. It's not a question, it's a compliment for you.
Yeah,
From
I see it. Somebody enjoyed my book, American Veda. I'm grateful for that. I'm always grateful when I hear that people get something out of that book and my other books, but especially this one, and especially when it comes from people who are from India and born into the Hindu tradition, because one of the reasons I wrote that book, one of the reasons I'm teaching these courses here at HUA is I feel America has a great debt of gratitude to pay for India. So there's one thing I didn't mention yet is the overall impact of the gurus who came here, the people they affected, who in turn had a big effect on Americans. The overall effect has been a real transformation of spirituality in the West. Western religion and people's attitudes toward spirituality and the way the practices they take on an everyday basis, mainstream Americans, it has changed radically, especially in the last 40 or 50 years. And so, and a big part of that were the swamis and yogacharyas and gurus who came here representing different aspects of the Hindu Dharma, and also the Buddhist teachers who came here, the Zen teachers from Japan and the other teachers from other parts of Asia. All taken all together, it's a radical transformation of American spirituality. And so I feel we owe a great debt to India. And so when Indian people appreciate that I stood for that, it's gratifying.
Another question that we have is from Ero Moreno. What about Tantra?
Yeah, what about it? Well, of course, it's included. The principal teachings that came here, you would have to say, of all the great variety of teachings that we associate with Hinduism, it was primarily Vedanta and Advaita Vedanta specifically, and of course yoga, the yoga tradition of the philosophies and methods of Vedanta and yoga are the dominant aspects of what came here. But Tantra's mixed in. You know, people in America, it's always interesting when the term Tantra comes up, because people like me, we're very conscious of the fact that most people associate Tantra with sex and sexuality and sexual methodologies. You know, and Tantra is a whole lot more than that. When one of the interesting things about the focusing on the representatives who came here from India, they all had their different angles on Vedanta. They all had different yogic methods that they taught, because, you know, there's this tremendous diversity, you know, as anybody who goes to India discovers. Some were bhaktas, some were jnanis, some were emphasized karma yoga, and they all emphasized practices. But even among the teachers who emphasized dhyan and meditation practices, there's a great variety of styles of practice. And that, of course, hatha yoga, you know, there's a tremendous variety of, you know, even the teachers who were trained by the, you know, seminal teacher, you know, Krishnamacharya, even the ones who were trained in by him and his lineage, they teach differently. So Iyengar taught differently from his, you know, his Guru Bhai and Patabi Joyce and the other. There's a certain amount of innovation and adaptation that each guru has that still enables them to teach with integrity, representing a lineage. So there's this great variety. And one of the things you realize is academics like to make distinctions. Advaita Vedanta, Vishishta Advaita, you know, and all this Dvaita, and distinguish yogic from Vedantic and tantric and put things in boxes. The gurus don't care about that. They did whatever worked. So there are elements of Tantra that enter into the teachings people presented as Vedanta. So, for example, a lot of the mantras that are used by teachers in conveying forms of meditation and kirtan and bhakti, they're tantric, from the tantric tradition. And so there's a lot of overlap, and you can get lost in the weeds if you know, separate them out. But some of the teachers emphasize tantric teachings more than others, and others emphasize Vedanta more, and others are strictly yogis. But there's a lot of overlap and a lot of mixing and matching. So it's interesting to observe. So Osho, for example, would talk about Tantra a lot. And others didn't use the word Tantra because they knew it had these connotations that might be off-putting to Americans. But in their teachings, they incorporated ideas and practices from Tantra, particularly Kashmir Shaivism, which Muktananda talked about a great deal and drew from a great deal. So thanks for bringing that up. That's an interesting area to explore during the larger course.
Another question from Pankaj Parekh is, what teachers are you planning to comment on?
Oh, well, we'll begin. I should have written out the 10 sections, but going in chronological order means we start with Vivekananda. Vivekananda set the template. He was the first. And in the fame he acquired and the legacy he left behind, there was a template of how to present these teachings in English, what to emphasize, what not to emphasize. And the response to him and the Swamis in his lineage that were trained at Belur Math outside Calcutta and still are, the legacy that comes from Ramakrishna and Vivekananda coming here and all the Swamis who followed is an important piece of the story. And it goes on to this day. There's several Swamis in that lineage who are very popular on the speaking circuit, on YouTube. And this is, now close to 130 years after Vivekananda first came here. So he set the template, and we'll devote time to him and his lineage. And then Yogananda came. There were others who came, Swami Tirtha, other people who came in the early part of the 20th century, didn't stay very long, but left something behind. And then the next truly influential one was Yogananda, who came in 1920 and was the first of the prominent gurus to settle here in America. And that's an important part of the story, the Americanization of it all. And then in the 60s, we had to deal with the Great Depression and World War II. And so some of the teachings persisted during those years. But then in the post-war era, beginning in the late 50s, but especially in the 60s, late 60s through the 70s, my generation of spiritual seekers, there were all these gurus on the scene. The most famous and influential of whom was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And, some of you are familiar with what happened in 1967 and 68 when the Beatles, he became the Beatles guru, and it was a global phenomenon, ended up putting meditation practice into the mainstream. And at the same time, Srila Prabhupada came and introduced the Gaudiya Vaishnavite tradition, that what we think of as the Hare Krishna movement, which was the most Indian and the most on the outer level, the surface level, the most Hindu of the lineages that came here, because they were busy doing kirtan in the streets and everything and establishing a very interesting reputation. But there was, the authentic bhakti tradition introduced to America. And at first it was just for, people on the fringes of the counterculture. But kirtan as a whole has become part of the American spiritual landscape now with, and it was introduced by them. So we want to look at the overall impact they had. Swami Muktananda came shortly afterward, and as I said, introduced Kashmir Shaivism and the great poet saints of India, and Shaktipat, Kundalini, and all those phenomena and aspects of the teachings that he tended to emphasize. And they all taught different forms of meditation. Yogananda did, they all did. But some taught also, more some hatha yoga, some taught some bhakti. It was all mixed up. And then at the same time, in the 70s, came a lot of other teachers, some of whom would be very familiar, and some of whom were less known, but still had an impact. And then later, we have some of the teachers who are still living. And going back, I should mention Swami Satchidananda, who became world famous when he spoke at the famous Woodstock Rock Festival, opened the show, and he and his Guru Bhai, Swami Vishnu Devananda, were trained by the Swami Sivananda of Rishikesh, who was world renowned. And they came here and emphasized a lot of more of asana practice and trained Americans to be yoga teachers. That was important. Iyengar and Patapi Joyce came later. So all these different threads, lesser known teachers who came and had, and some of whom still have a legacy. Almost all the ones I mentioned had institutions they established here in the West, ashrams, centers, and in many cases they still exist, communities. Um, and then later, the teachers who are more familiar to contemporary people and younger people, because they're still alive and still have influence here. And until COVID, at least, were coming here regularly, and now probably are again. The most well-known, of course, is Mata Amritananda, who's known as Amaji, Ama, the hugging, so-called hugging saint. She and her uh, people, her disciples and others have had a tremendous effect. They have an ashram here in California. Whenever she comes, thousands of people go. Sadhguru comes and goes. He has an ashram in Tennessee. Of course, Sri Ravi Shankar, he has institutions here. He comes and goes. People go to India to be with them. And there are other lesser known gurus. And another important feature of what they did was many of them, if not most, trained Americans to represent their teachings. So some of the legacy continues in the hands of Americans. Is that appropriation? Is that going to in any way dilute or diminish the impact of the teachings? Or is it going to enhance it? Why did they do it? These are interesting questions. I'm one of them. I like to think I'm doing it with integrity, but there are some of the teachings get distorted and corrupted for commercial reasons and others, and that too has to be addressed. I'll leave that question with that.
Thank you for this elaborate answers. Kumugupta ji, she would like to ask you a question herself. You can unmute yourself, Kumuji.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I see a plant and a clock.
Yes. Yeah, we've spoken before, but I just want to ask you a very obvious question, that how do you know that these people, when not just trying to sell you, sell you something,
Yeah.
because the people here don't know the difference and they just want gullible people and just to come to the West, and who wouldn't want to come to the West, right? So especially in those days, no one knows the difference. So how do you distinguish that from a true philosopher?
It's a good question. And there have always been, look, people in India know this better than Americans. There's always been corrupt, what we call charlatans and frauds parading as, God men, as they called in India. And some of them can do great harm. Some of them just come and go and don't. And it is not easy to distinguish. Uh, and a lot of people came away disillusioned. There were, in addition to the gurus who had positive impact on many people, thousands, if not millions, there were people who came and went, who exploited people, took their money, abused people sexually. So there is that. And some of the legacy is mixed because some of the gurus, especially from in the 60s and 70s, it turned out that they misbehaved, and there was sexual improprieties that people tried to keep secret, but that eventually came out, and there were scandals. There were also rumors that turned out to be unfounded, and so it gets very hard to discern what's true and what's not. But the evidence is pretty strong that some of them misbehaved sexually, tried to keep it secret and failed, and that there were a lot of people who got hurt. At the same time, those very same gurus transformed the lives of their followers and their students for the better, despite having, in some cases, misbehaved and caused pain. And this is, so we can't dismiss the people who weren't 100% pure and good, because they, at the same time, transformed and introduced authentic spiritual teachings, authentic interpretations of the wisdom of the rishis and methodologies, yogic techniques, meditation techniques that there's unequivocal evidence that they change people's lives for the better by all measurements of health and well-being and spiritual progress. These techniques work. These methods work. The ideas hold up to scrutiny and scientific investigation. So even if the exponents and the representatives were not, what we would hope, did not behave the way we hope gurus should, they still can be effective the same way an artist can produce great art and misbehave in their private life. So it gets a little mixed up. And you're right to ask the question, because a lot of people get enthralled in the presence of a guru in orange robes, or someone sitting up on a pedestal with flowers and people standing up and, doing pranams to them and thinking, they're incarnations of God. So, that can be intoxicating, and people can set themselves up for disappointment. And it has happened a lot. But I would contend that most of the gurus who came here had a positive impact, even if some of their followers were hurt and wounded and disillusioned and disappointed. And, because very few people came here and were outright charlatans who, should be in jail. But, there were some. And we have to acknowledge that. So you have to have discernment, and people have to have maturity. And I think after all that happened, especially in the 60s and 70s, newer generations of spiritual seekers who go to see gurus and stuff may be less gullible and less susceptible to misconduct. We hope.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you.
Thank you, Kumuji. And we have one more question. I think this question by Kerry has already been answered or addressed by you. But
Yeah.
we didn't.
Thank
Would
you,
like
Carrie.
Yeah. So she also has the same question about how do you account for the misbehavior and sexual inappropriateness of some of these gurus.
Yeah. And,
So-
and accounting for it is different from just acknowledging it. How do we explain it? How do we understand that people who presumably, in some cases, were assumed to have achieved moksha and, with highest states of awakening and liberation, would misbehave when that's not supposed to be the case? when people functioning at, high levels of consciousness, according to some of the teachings, would automatically have high level of morality and goodness. And yet that doesn't seem to always be the case. So this is a long discussion, but it's an ongoing conversation and object of research. Is that assumption true? Are there different levels of enlightenment? Can people exhibit certain signs of awakening or moksha? Can they be, in some ways, recognized as jivan muktis and yet misbehave? Or is there something missing in their development and they're not really truly realized? These are things that are worthy of discussion. But on a practical level, people just have to have their eyes open and, demand transparency and not get duped.
So another question, apart from what she's asking, we've got a lot of questions,
Yeah.
lot many. So will you be focusing on the teachings of the gurus? I think
Yes, yes.
yeah.
As I said earlier, you obviously came a little late. I'll be focusing on who they were, the dynamics of how, what they achieved here, what they left behind, but also what they emphasized in their teachings. And we'll get tastes of it through the use of videos and that sort of thing.
Okay. From Sean, I loved your biography of Yoganand. Have you ever thought of writing a biography of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi?
The answer to that question is yes. I thought of it and I rejected the idea. And the reasons for it was, of all the gurus, he's the one I knew best. I spent time with him. I was trained by him, and he had an enormous impact. But at the time, after American Veda was published, and I was thinking what to do next, the idea of doing a full-on biography of some of the more prominent gurus came to mind. Somebody was doing one of Vivekananda, so that, and two different people were doing them. So I didn't do that. And a friend of mine was going to write a biography of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. So I said, well, I'm not going to do that. And there was already a British biographer who did that, and there were documentary films. So I said that, no, I'll let others do that. And I focused on the biography of Yogananda. I'd still be open to doing others if I thought it was viable. Because they all deserve some kind of, and I'm going to be honest with you, after my biography of Yogananda came out, two different organizations asked if I would do a biography of their guru, but they insisted on having the final word on the content, and I couldn't let them do that. So.
Okay, and now anonymous attendee. Okay. The question is, what drew you towards Indian spirituality?
Me personally, I came of age in the 60s, 1960s. It was a very crazy time. Many of you in attendance probably were not here at that time, but it was a very turbulent time, and I was caught up in it, and I was searching for answers to the important questions of life and not getting satisfactory answers from my professors, my family, the culture as a whole. There was a lot of discontent with values and mores of American life at the time. It seemed very superficial and materialistic. But conventional religion, I had rejected already. And so I was searching. And in the circles I traveled, suddenly there were books about Zen Buddhism and Vedanta and yoga and some of the leading thinkers who people I admired, like Joseph Campbell and Alan Watts and Christopher Isherwood and the novelist J.D. Salinger, they were all adapting these teachings and writing about them, Aldous Huxley. And so I said, what's going on here? And reading about Indian philosophy, we could say, or Vedanta mainly, it blew my mind. I said, oh, there's something here. There's something that makes sense. There's something that holds up to reason. This is not all silly superstition and religious mumbo jumbo. And they all said the proof of the pudding is in the practices. So, I set out to learn Zen meditation and this and that, and I ended up learning Maharshi's transcendental meditation after the Beatles did. And these methods worked, and I was just one of millions of people who found the same things. So it was just a search for truth and wisdom and methods of personal transformation. And I was just a product of a time when, books like Autobiography of a Yogi and then copies of the Gita and things like that, people were passing them around to each other. I still have the copy of Autobiography of a Yogi that I read in 1970.
Right.
And I have no idea where I got it because I couldn't have afforded to buy it at the time. So I'm pretty sure I borrowed it and never returned it. So if you're out there, whoever I borrowed it from, I still have it.
Uh, well, if Deepti Behel, she would like to ask you a question. I'm unmuting, allowing her to talk. Deepti ji, please unmute yourself.
Oh, yeah. Annie. Okay. Oh, it's a long question. Can you discuss your opinion on the term guru? Yeah, that has to be discussed. It's, of course, it entered the vocabulary just like mantra entered the vocabulary and pundit and karma. And, these are terms Americans have adopted that have a certain use. And of course, they get corrupted and misrepresented and trivialized. So anybody who teaches anything is called a guru in America. There are financial gurus and real estate gurus and, whatever. So the term gets misused. If we think of it, and I have to say, people who are very familiar with the term as it applies to spiritual teachers, there's also some overlap. To some, a guru, a true guru, is somebody who not only represents the teachings and has a handle on them to communicate and is skilled at translating from the original sources to, a way that can appeal to Americans. But a true guru would also embody the teachings, be a realized person, one established in the ideal of unity consciousness that is described by the yogis and the rishis. But how do we know? How do we know they have? Because, you can't tell from outer behavior. There are probably people walking around in high states of realization who don't have any charisma or any, magnetic personality. And so nobody would know that they are. And there's some people who are very charismatic and very appealing who we might think, oh, they have it. but turn out not to have it, just to have a personality that can suggest that. I used to joke that, maybe I should grow a beard and wear orange. I know how to pretend to be realized. I could make a lot of money. And, people joke about this but there's some truth to the fact that you can't really judge who's deserving of being called a guru or sadguru by their outer behavior or by what they know. There are people teaching in universities who know everything there is to know. It doesn't mean they're a guru. So it gets difficult. And so you have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis.
Shall I ask my question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Deepthi Bail. So my question, I really enjoyed your book, American Veda, and you said in the book that there is appropriation by other authors. Like, for example, Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now, I think, does not credit Vedanta, but kind of, borrows a lot of concepts. And that seems to happen a lot where people borrow the concepts but do not give credit. So I just wanted to ask for your thoughts on that.
Yes, and it's true. There are people who have been trained by the gurus we'll talk about in this course to represent their teachings, but then they become a little more independent and don't even talk about the lineage they represent. They just make it appear that this all came to them, or that they studied this and that, and they don't give the credit to their own teachers or their lineage. But most people who, were properly trained do that and honor the tradition. But there is one of the beauties of the Hindu Dharma is its adaptability. So you see meditation practices, yogic methods, pranayama, asana being taught in secular settings or being advocated by physicians, psychotherapists in a secular health context. This is a tremendous, one of the tremendous things that occurred as these teachings became integrated into American life and assimilated. People adapted them who did not want to have anything to do with what they think is religion or spirituality, but see the demonstrable evidence-based value in some of the practices. And unfortunately, some of them adopt it and say, here's this meditation, you should practice it for your anxiety and your mental health, and no credit to where it came from. And that's unfortunate. At the same time, it's kind of inevitable. And if people are helped and they don't know where the help really came from, it would be hard to deny them the help. And so this is part of the thing. Where there's appropriation and one can intervene and say, sir or ma'am, you're representing yoga, you should give credit to where it came. We should do that. We should hold people to account because, it's one of the things I said at the end of American Veda. One of the things I was hoping would happen is it would help give India the credit that it should have for being the birthplace of these teachings and for preserving them. And it's kind of a miracle that these teachings that go back hundreds and thousands of years were preserved through all the centuries of colonization and turmoil that was visited upon India, yet the teaching survived and came to the West and made a great contribution. So I agree with you that it's a shame when the credit is not properly given. And I think we should all be vigilant about that.
Thank you.
One more question from Mr. Subramaniam. Please unmute yourself and you can ask a question. Please unmute yourself. Subramaniamji, can you please unmute yourself? You are allowed to talk. I think he's not, okay, he's there. Should we take, because we are actually running out of time, Philipji, should we take a couple of more questions? If he comes
Sure,
back, we can.
I'm happy to go over if we need to.
I will quickly take this one question. Rakesh is what is the effect of these teachings in present day US political geographic scenario? Is it working?
I won't speak to the politico part of it. American politics is a whole other story. But it's interesting because I'm in touch with a lot of American yogis and meditators and people who, for all practical purposes, are much more Hindu than they are Christian or Jewish or whatever. And it informs their political views, in certain ways. But that's a different issue. The question is, one of the interesting things is, back in the 60s and 70s, it was a big deal when a guru came to America, and they got a lot of publicity. Now, if, Amma comes and, has a week in Los Angeles or Chicago or something, and 40 or 50,000 people come to see her, it's not even in the newspapers. It's part of life. There's centers and ashrams in America. It seldom is newsworthy as it once was. So it's become the teachings have become part of American life. And the presence, and especially the last 20, 30 years, it's not just, this ashram in the countryside and this teacher and the people they trained having a meditation center here or the Hare Krishna temple here. It's Hindu Americans who are part of the culture, and there are temples now all over America. I remember 12 years ago or so doing lectures when American Veda came out, and I remember being stunned to discover there was a Hindu temple in Nashville, Tennessee. It seemed so unlikely, but now there are temples everywhere. And somebody whose mother was born in Tamil Nadu, whose middle name is Devi, is running for president. So, the presence of Hindu Dharma is very subtle, and it continues to impact American spirituality. I have a podcast called Spirit Matters. I recommend it to you, and I try to get a diversity of people on it to interview. And some of the people are, representing a Christian tradition or a Jewish tradition or whatever. A lot of them were affected by the gurus who came here, or by reading the Gita, or reading the Upanishads, or going to an ashram in India. It changed the way they do their own religion. So some of the effect that the gurus have had and that the teachings have had is very subtle. There's a resurgence of Christian meditation practices now. That's all because meditation was made popular and respectable by the gurus who came here. So some of the impact is not obvious. At the same time, there's yoga studios everywhere, and some of them are teaching more than just asana practice, and some of them, unfortunately, are just physical fitness centers. So, the variety of influence is huge, and it's still ongoing. If I were to do a follow-up sequel to American Veda now, there'd be a lot more to talk about that didn't even exist 10, 15 years ago. So it's ongoing. And as people go to India and come back, as more Indians settle here and become Americanized and assimilated, the influence, people marry Hindus, there's all kinds of ways these ideas and practices enter into the culture.
We have 19 more questions, so
Oh
I
my,
don't think.
I'll be brief.
Yes, so we'll, and please, audiences, no more questions because we are already at the top of the hour, but we'll take as many as we can now. So here is a question from Subramanyam ji. It is said that one should have a guru in making progress
Yeah.
in spiritual journey and reaching enlightenment. But guru-shishya relationship is becoming impractical these days. Most seem to see gurus as teachers. Students seem to have many teachers. How important is it to have a single guru and have guru-shishya relationship?
This is all to me, and I think every guru who ever came here would say the same thing. It's an individual matter. Some people can be drawn to a close guru-shishya relationship, and it's beneficial and it endures like a good marriage. Some people enter into such a relationship and it turns out not to be a good fit, so there's a divorce or a separation, and they maybe find another guru, or they decide to pursue their spiritual progress without that relationship and just have many upagurus instead of, one single sadguru, but to have many teachers they learn from. That seems to be a very American way of doing these things. And it's been the case ever since, Vivekananda came. He had very close disciples, but he also had people who just came and learned from him. Same with Yogananda. And they always set up their institutions so that it accommodates different people, different tastes. So they were very close disciples of these teachers. And some of them were made swamis, and some of them became, monastics, and some of them devoted their lives to serving their gurus and did it faithfully. Some left, some got angry. But the biggest percentage of people were people further out on the periphery. They were not going to have a one-on-one, ongoing, devoted relationship with a guru, but they wanted to learn from them, and they went with respect and dignity, and they learned from them. And some people just are way out on the periphery. They'll come and, go learn something and come back 6 months later and come and go. And that's part of the way these teachings influenced Americans. We talked about the Beatles and Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. A lot of people became very close to him, and they became disciples in a sense. But the vast majority just learned to meditate and went about their business. Same with the yoga masters. There were, there's differences. So it's up for debate whether the highest attainments of spirituality require that guru-shishya relationship, or is it possible to progress, without that? And the evidence seems to be that, both can be true.
Thank you. And Arun Jainji is asking, Yogananda obviously is known for skillfully blending Hinduism and Christianity. Did he write or speak anything about Judaism and Islam?
I did not come across very many mentions of Judaism. I know he went to the Holy Land at one point. He paid homage to all the traditions, but he didn't, he didn't write about it. I mean, there's a 1,200 page 2-volume set of books about what he said about Christian teachings and Jesus and all that. There's no such thing with Islam or Judaism. He treated all the traditions with respect. He had Jewish and Muslim people come and share the stage with him and things like that. But he did not take them on the way he did Christianity.
Okay, here is a question from Eddie related to the course. I would like to ask, some of the most influential gurus to Westerners live and teach in India, but have YouTube influence in the millions. Will you also cover some of these?
Yeah.
Because I want to know about all the Hindu gurus who are influencing us today. And not
That's a
just
very, very good question. Usually when I talk about this, and in my book, in American Veda, I make mention of gurus who, or spiritual masters who had great influence on America, but never came here. So Ramana Maharshi is a great example. He never left Tiruvannamalai, really. He was there. He died in 1950. Very few people knew about him when he was alive, but a lot of people know about him now, and he's had a big impact. Same with Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo's had a huge impact on America. Then there's other gurus. Neem Karoli Baba had a big influence because some of his disciples were Americans who became very famous and talked about him. And, all their work was based on their relationship with him. Swami Shivananda. So there are many who never came here. And yes, there are others like Dayananda Saraswati, who I was fortunate enough to meet before he passed. His lineage has had an impact. Chinmaya Mission has had an impact, and some of the others. And so, yes, we will talk about them, but they're just not as well known because, the others had a bigger impact. But we will acknowledge them at the very least.
Here's a question by Helen. Did or do you have guru? If so, who?
Well, as I said, I spent a lot of time with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. I was trained as a teacher of his form of meditation, and that was back in the 70s. So he was my guru. But then I'm one of those people who do not do well in organizational life. And so I wanted to explore more widely, and I did that. I honor him as my first teacher, and I'm grateful for everything I learned from him. But I learned a lot from many other teachers as well, and that suits me and my personality to have that kind of freelance attitude. But he was, the most influential of the teachers on me.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. We can just quickly maybe skim through them. And if you can, if you find appropriate, you can take them.
Yes, we'll say something about the Theosophical Society, but not a whole lot because we're focusing on the gurus and the yogacharyas, whereas I wrote a lot about theosophy and its role in this whole story in American Veda.
Then we have looking at the big picture of human evolution. This is being asked by Bachana. Do you have a theory or hypothesis why this movement started to happen in the 20th century?
Oh boy, that's a That's a big one. I mean, for one thing, you have to understand, it actually started before that. Story I wrote in American Veda goes back to the early 19th century when prominent Americans like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau their lives were being changed by Hindu Dharma and Buddhist Dharma, but it was through books. There were no gurus coming at the time. So this course is focused on the teachers who came. But the process goes, the phenomenon goes back to the early days of India's contact with the West. And it slowly built. There were scholars who respected Hinduism and wrote about it and translated texts like the Gita into other languages. And so it was a slow process. But then when you finally come to 1893, and somebody like Vivekananda could get here on a boat and travel around on a train and have magazines and newspapers write about him, then things change. By the time Yogananda came, you could fly on a plane. And well, not immediately. And then there was radio. And so the advances in technology of transportation, communication, all that happened. So the 60s were possible because of television and jet planes and videotape and all these means of communication that allowed Americans to be exposed to these teachings. It just wasn't possible as we say, it wasn't possible to scale like it in the earlier days.
Okay, this one more furry. The benefits of yoga and meditation have reached many thanks to our gurus. You talked about how Americans have been increasingly put in leadership positions in some of the spiritual organizations. Can you please elaborate on what specific benefits?
Well, as I said, this is, first of all, it's inevitable. If you were going to have a big impact, you had to have an institution, you had to have funding, you had to have a building, and you needed to train people. Yogananda took a lot of flack when he first started to democratize his teachings because he couldn't teach everybody who wanted to learn from him one-on-one as it's done in India. So they start using technology. They start training other people to represent them. And here they are in America. So they trained Americans and they did their best to train people who would carry on the teachings properly and with integrity. Of course, there was always, exceptions to that. So to me, it boils down to the character of the people who represent the teachings and the quality of their training. And of course, it's a risky proposition because with each generation of teachers, and then there's the possibility of corruption of the teachings and dilution of the teachings and misunderstandings. That's, has to be guarded against. And there's people who want to, for commercial purposes or, the sake of their own egos, to make innovations that they think will sell or be distinctive in some way. And some of them are reasonable ways of adapting the teachings to a different culture, and some of them are just corruption. And so, there's advantages and disadvantages, and, everybody, the need for viveka, for discernment is important in these cases, and vigilance.
Okay, and now Chandra Hari is asking, yoga has usually been accepted in West as methods of exercise, but does not have roots of true yoga mentioned in Hindu scriptures. Has West really understood?
And yes, has the West really understood, blah, blah, blah. Some have and some have not. If you go to just go to New York City or Los Angeles and go to all the different yoga studios, and you'll see some people teaching on a very high level and offering, the fullness of the yoga tradition in a proper manner, representing all the fullness and beauty and uh, power of it, and others not. Others not. Some Americans have a very good grasp of it. There's a friend of mine in Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount University who established the first master's degree in yoga studies. And that is being done with great integrity to the tradition. And other people, are not as vigilant and not as, they don't treat it with the same honor. And some people don't care. They just want to stretch and bend and feel better or lose weight or fix their back. And you can't, it would be criminal to deny them the value of that portion, that little sliver of yoga that can help them with their health if that's all they're interested in. But some people come to yoga for that, and then they realize, oh, there's more to this. And they explore and they become, it starts to affect their lives in a bigger way. So, hey, Sarah McLean, my friend, says, I can't judge another person's level of awakening or enlightenment from where they sit. I agree. I can't. I've been at this for more than 50 years, and I stopped a long time ago trying to judge who's awakened and who's not. I just can only speak for myself.
I think this is again from an anonymous attendee. I think this is it should be HUA. So besides the negative aspects, would you recommend what positive aspects can be followed in today's times and can be academically relevant to HUA?
Oh my goodness. The positive aspect is, the overwhelming wealth of the Hindu Dharma and the Hindu tradition. I think HUA is doing a terrific job. I remember when it was first decided to emphasize online courses through HUA. And there were a few offerings. There's a tremendous diversity and richness of the curriculum now. It's pretty extraordinary. Very skilled teachers, very highly qualified teachers. And I think, to me, anything can become academically relevant in the right hands. I'm not an academic. I don't have an advanced degree. So I'm grateful that HUA recognizes I have something to offer. But there's just, to me, the overwhelming impact of Hindu Dharma on the West is beyond doubt. Positive doesn't do it justice. It has been transformative. It has changed for the better many aspects of American life, most importantly, religion and spirituality. So yes, there's always a shadow side to things. There's a shadow side to medicine and to law. There's abuses. There's, misuses. That's part of, it's inevitable. But it puts responsibility on those of us who value the Dharma to be vigilant and try to prevent those that shadow side from corrupting things.
Thank you so much.
My friend Roland is quoting something I often say. He says, sitting in temple and thinking I'm spiritual is like sitting in my garage and thinking I'm a car. Okay. The first time I heard that, it was by a minister who said, sitting in church and thinking you're spiritual is like sitting in a garage and thinking you're a car. Yes, I agree. Just showing up is not enough. It depends on what you bring to it and what you take, how open you are and what you take from it. I go for walks in the woods like I did today here in New England. And some days it's a spiritual experience, and some days it's just exercise. So it's what we bring to the temple and to the experiences of life. And it's what we bring to a guru or, any teacher. Are we bringing the right attitude? There's this a passage in the Gita that says, go to the wise, and it says to go and ask questions and be inquisitive, have respect, have reverence, be willing to serve. So there's ways to approach gurus and get more out of it. But you also have to be careful. The Tibetans say this should be a guideline for everything. Tibetans say that the guru is like a fire. If you don't get close enough, you don't get warm. But if you get too close, you can get burned. So there's a proper attitude of independence and judgment and clarity of thought. And at the same time, closeness, get close enough to learn and, be transformed by the presence of the guru, but not give up your independence of thought at the same time. Oh, there's so much to say. So I hope everybody or many of you take the course and we can go into these things in more detail. I see some really good questions, but we're at it. We don't have time.
Yes, so thank you so very much for this enlightening discussion, your introduction to your course, the new course. And I would request everyone to just at least look at it. You will feel motivated to join the course, learn about the profound impact of Indian gurus, swamis on American spirituality. And as Philip Ji has elaborated, it will be about not just one guru, it will be about many, many of them.
And gurus in general.
Yes, gurus in general, yes. And we will be sharing the video recording of the same, the webinar, and all the relevant information about the course.
Yeah, do we need to mention when it starts and all
Yes,
that?
I will also be sharing the complete course details.
Okay.
And everything will be shared, our phone numbers, our contact emails, everything. For information, the course begins on October 14th, ends on December 16th. And it will be every Monday, 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time for 10 weeks.
Yes. And remember, that's the same as Monday Night Football, but you can record the football game.
Yes. So, and I'm sure it will be extremely, extremely enlightening to know about all the gurus, their impact, and to interact with you. So thank you so very much. It was a pleasure hosting you, Philip Ji.
Thank you, Pragya.
Namaste to everyone. Thank you for taking out time for the webinar.
Thank you all.
Have a good day and good night to all who are joining us from India or the other side of the continent, I would say. Thank you so much. Thank you. Namaste.